Noah Hawley sure has gambled big on a season 2 renewal. I couldn't believe it the first time I watched episode 8. Nothing from season 1 gets resolved. That's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it works out for him. I think most disappointing to me, I'm wondering what you're the most disappointed in. I mean, I like this episode a lot, but I can't believe the eye didn't say even one word. Got so close, but it didn't happen. If Alien Earth doesn't get a season 2 renewal, it will be the most devastating cancellation since the Sarah Connor Chronicles didn't get a season 3. Remember that? That was shocking. Just goes to show you that you can create all the cliffhangers you want. And if the studio doesn't feel the numbers are there, the numbers are not there. Whew! I'm still not over Sarah Connor Chronicles not getting a season 3 though. And that was 16 years ago. I still remember the final shot, well, vaguely, but I remember it. I remember how it felt. What TV or streaming show cancellation still haunts you to this day? I bet a lot of you are putting down Sarah Connor Chronicles right now. But you know what? Maybe Alien Earth won't get canceled. I mean, word is it's getting pirated like crazy. So, people are at least hate watching it. So maybe they'll do a season 2. Maybe they'll give it one more chance. Don't throw it out. Let's try and fix it. They could go from a weekly to a binge, right? Although I don't know if they would need to, because hopefully everybody who didn't watch season 1 will binge it, and that will have the effect that's needed. I keep saying they should have maybe done the Amazon Prime thing, where Prime Video releases a first season for binge, like they did with The Boys and Fallout, and then they switch to the 3 episodes up front and then a weekly release. Although Alien Earth did start with 2 episodes. But maybe Noah Hawley should, listen to some of the feedback and take it seriously, right? Like, don't pull a Star Wars, Noah Hawley. Don't bury your head in the sand because a genuine number of fans don't like the direction you're trying to take the franchise. Their franchise. It is theirs because they're the ones who made it a thing. So I think, I think if Noah Hawley, so let's say Noah Hawley is taking suggestions, right? What do you think he should do to make season 2 do a little better with the fans, right? Is it just a matter of how it's released, weekly versus binge? Or if you were going to make some creative changes for season 2, what would you suggest? Particularly those of you who seem to hate the show. What would make you not hate the show? Even hate it a little less. I'm particularly curious, honestly, instead of saying, hey, cancel it, how do we get ourselves out of this mess? Alien Earth season 1 might have just come to an end, but the fall season is only getting started. Movies, shows, awards, and it's all going to be covered right here on Beyond the Trailer. So I hope you'll subscribe for reviews, box office report, which also covers streaming charts, trailer reactions and breakdowns, live streams, all the goodies, again, right here in one place. All you have to do is subscribe, and you'll always know when the party is going on here. All right, so Alien Earth Season 1's finale has ended up as a giant setup for Season 2. So that's how we're going to look at it. The big questions of what's next, or what we're excited for what's next. Because we'll talk about it. I don't know how many questions they've raised instead of maybe things they just haven't wrapped up. But we've got what's next for the humans, synthetics, and aliens. Oh my. All right. I mean, that's interesting. I didn't think of that. They haven't really introduced any big questions. I mean, they have the big revolt of the hybrids, but that's still kind of not fully formed. So it's really not so, usually the formula for seasons of a show is that you wrap things up and then they lead to new developments, which create questions for going forward. But here it's more like, well, we just didn't finish the story we started, so we have to keep going. And I don't know if that's the way to go. All right, so coming out of episode 8, I'm the most excited going forward for Arthur and the Eye. What a combo. And then also the twins. Well, they're not twins exactly, but when they walked out in this shot, what a shot, in tandem, it really underscored, I think actually for the first time, just how much Sydney Chandler and Alex Lothar look alike, from their features to their build to their hairstyles. I thought that was really cool. It's very cool, very effective, and very genre-y. Twins, are a big, twins are a big part of genre storytelling. So, of course, I ate this up with a spoon. Nom, 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 nom. I really like that a lot. This shot was incredible. Maybe it took too long to get to this point. That's, a big finale doesn't mean anything if people still aren't around to see the finale. That's something they teach you in writing and stuff. A lot of people feel, you should end with your best stuff. And you're like, no, because people might not stick around to see it or hear it or read it. All right, but between these two, I want to start with Arthur because he has become a fascinating character. He is now a host to 2 alien parasites, right? First, it was the new Xenomorph, which is growing up fast. And now that he's dead, the Eye has taken up the vacancy. So he's also a host to the Eye. Now, this is important because one theory that we have is that the reason that the other Xenomorph doesn't kill Joe is because it can sense that Joe is technically his papa, because the older Xenomorph was grown in Joe's lung. So that would give Arthur, and therefore now the Eye, who has reanimated Arthur's body, a connection to this other Xenomorph. Will Wendy no longer have a monopoly on having a bond with Xenomorphs? And how will she react to that? How does a child ever react to discovering they're not as special as they thought? And that's kind of already happening with the hybrids finding out that they can still die. And they're not taking it very well. I was so nervous about who the Eye would go into, particularly when they were pointing at some extras. I was like, oh no, that extra doesn't pop. I think I was seeing the problem they were having, like they don't want to give away who the Eye is going to go into. And they really did surprise us. Were you surprised? Oh, I think I saw a few of you guess. But I didn't think they had any good options. Because you need an actor who's really going to be able to sell the Eye, when it finally does speak. So I was thinking, before Arthur stepped up, that they were going to have to wait until next season and bring in a new actor who they could sell on the show based on the hype of the show. Like, this is a hot new show. Don't you want to be part of it? We can get an even better actor than we would have otherwise been able to. But that hype never materialized, so I'm glad that's not the tactic they went with. Arthur, though, never occurred to me. It was a fantastic surprise. Just like when he volunteered for the facehugger, I was like, wow. Like, it's funny because usually when a human gets sacrificed for an alien parasite, we're all horrified. We all feel terrible. We're like, no. Even when it's a red shirt, we're like, poor dude. But there's just something about Arthur, to Holly and the writer's credit. They engineered him in a way where you're with Arthur for some reason, and I wonder why you think it is. You're like, you know what? He's actually a great choice. Yeah, alien parasite. He's okay. You go take that on. I mean, maybe Kirsh is starting to rub off on us, right? Look at actor David Rysdahl, married to Zazie Beetz, by the way, in real life. Maybe she can join the show, right? Come on, we need all the help we can get over here. He's so unlike Arthur, though, which means he should have range. So he should be able to show a real distinction as the Eye takes over. Like, Boy Kavalier was only focusing on the difference of smart versus dumb. But there are so many other aspects to a personality. What about good versus evil, obviously? We're thinking the Eye actually might be evil, but, maybe. Passive versus aggressive, confident versus uneasy, rough around the edges versus refined. And these aren't either ors. It's a sliding scale in every case. So who knows what the Eye is actually like? I'm so excited to find out, and why they have to have a season 2. I've seen people say the Eye should get a spinoff. If we can't get a season 2 of Alien Earth, can we get a season 1 of the Eye? But we're starting to get a glimpse of its personality when it attacked Joe. What a sequence! The Eye is so smart, it's chilling. I still love my Hannibal Lecter comparison. And again, to Holly and his writing team's credit, and the VFX team who animate the Eye, you can tell there's so much going on beneath the surface. When Boy Kavalier is like, if only you could talk, and the Eye nods in the direction of one of the bodyguards, like, hey, there's a guy right over there. Just put me in that guy. That was fantastic. And then when Boy Kavalier and Adam try to serve up the Eye to Joe, and Joe continues to be very smart and calm under pressure. What a great guy. And, he keeps his cool. It was a very clever plan to get into the containment unit. Too bad it had that feeding area. But it was so cool when at first the Eye went for the door handle. Like, it was like when a velociraptor used the door handle in Jurassic Park. You're like, oh my God, how could it use it? I mean, think about it. Animals, I guess, well, largely also because they don't have thumbs. But, they're not going around opening doors via the handle. That was just really amazing. And the way it was pulling on it, it was really cute, but also it was evil. And then when Wendy shows up, the eye, puts up a little bit of a fight, but I think it's interesting that eventually the eye was like, it's not worth it, man. And, instead of just having like this blind pursuit of a singular goal, like think about the Xenomorphs or like monsters in general. But in the world of Alien, the Xenomorphs are like must procreate, right? Or the face hugger. When a face hugger is let out, a face hugger is a good comparison because they both go for the face and they want to take over and grab you with their multiple limbs. But a face hugger just scrambles like crazy. It'll creep a little bit, but, the face hugger's not going to go look around, consider its options. It's like the closest face available will do, thank you very much. It's not a picky dater. But the eye can strategize. And in this case, it doesn't need to be in a host. So it's like, you know what? I'm just going to live to fight another day, and decides to retreat. That is incredible. Again, it's part of a strategy. So that's really amazing to see. So it escapes to say, hey, there's a lot of bodies around here. I'm sure I'll find somebody else. And it does. It finds Arthur on the beach alone. So far, we don't know what the eye was doing before this show. The eye origin story, prequel series. At the very end, Morrow shows up and sticks it in a tube. But anyway, or Chibuzo. But anyway, it's never gone after a dead body whenever we've seen it. It always takes over a live being. So I wonder if it's learning, right? That a dead body won't put up a fight and that nobody will be upset about taking it over. Not a bad strategy. Next, the rise of the hybrids with Wendy as their new leader. Move over, Peter Pan, or as she says, run. I thought that Sydney Chandler did such a wonderful job delivering that line. Not just, the vocal aspects of it, but the physical quality was so cool. You rarely get to see a female character like this. So the fact that she not only got to do it, but did it well, made me very proud. What is Joe going to do, though, with all these hybrids? I mean, he's the only human, right? Like, he's the bigger kid who has to play with all these little kids. And, he wants to do it, and he loves his sister and her friends very much, but it can't be that fulfilling. At least he has a connection maybe to the Xenomorph. Maybe that's something to explore in a potential season 2. Because again, he is its papa because it grew out of its lung. Maybe he and Wendy both end up having a connection. That would make, again, because there's a duality between them. Wouldn't that be interesting if they both had a connection to the Xenomorph after all? And speaking of not being mindless, while it's not nearly as smart as the eye, the older Xenomorph didn't kill Boy Kavalier. It only finds him as Wendy instructed it to do. Finding the graves really did a number on these hybrids. Woo! And I was talking to a friend of mine about this show because, the graveyard was introduced last week and how, it's really doing a number on these hybrids. And my friend wondered why it was so hard for them to accept that they'd moved to different vessels because it's kind of a form of reincarnation, right? I thought that was a great question. Why can't these kids just look at this as a form of reincarnation? And I thought about it, and this is the answer I came up with, which my friend thinks is good. I'll be curious what you think. I think it's that while kids might have a malleable enough mind to make the transfer, that also means they don't have a strong enough sense of self. Like they don't even know who they are yet. So it's really hard to ask them to accept that they don't know what's moved to a different vessel because they don't know, they don't have a strong sense of self. I think that's really good. I also liked what Adam says. He knew it was a mistake to use the minds of children, an eternity of are we there yet? But, the mind should eventually mature, right? As it would if it would continued on its path in a human body. So that doesn't make sense to me, but it was a funny joke. And also, because it's scary how fast they let go of their humanity. They're like, yeah, we'll be evil overlords. But I think maybe they're also not taking it too seriously. Like when I think about it, the way this scene unfolds, it's almost like they decide to play a game. And Wendy's just coming up with the rules for this pretend game. And they're like, yeah, sometimes games get out of control. They get out of hand, right? Because on that note, in this game where kids rule, as they say, what does that look like for kids? I think we might be jumping to a different book, and that's Lord of the Flies. They also decide that with their human, and that would actually fit very well because they're stuck on an island, right? So anyway, they decide also that with their human bodies in the ground, that makes them ghosts. And they come up with, what do ghosts do? They're the scary ones, not the ones who get scared. But it reminded me of the fabulous, of course, Ghost in the Shell, which asks a lot of the same questions. Although, how many metaphors and references are we going to do on this show, right? Are we doing Peter Pan or what? Let's stick to that. And Peter Pan still works. I did like using the line from Peter Pan that Wendy grew up, and that made Peter angry. But also we find out that our Peter Pan, as Wendy says, it turns out he was never a boy at all. So yes, one of the big reveals in this season finale is about Boy Kavalier. And it turns out that you could argue he was always a man, because at just 6 years old, he was able to build his first synthetic, Adam, who turns out to be Adam. And not only did he use his synthetic to kill his abusive father, but to become his new father, so that even at 6, Boy Kavalier could start to move freely through the world with the illusion of adult supervision because of this synthetic that he'd built. And so Wendy points out that Boy Kavalier is actually exactly like his abusive father, an angry little man who hates everyone. And sure enough, has surrounded himself with literal, yes, robots, right? Adam and Kirsh. They're programmed to do what he says and to more or less always, I mean, he made them both a little snippy. I do wonder if he built Kirsh as well. But to follow his commands, right? So much for wanting a challenging conversation, right? I think that's very interesting that, Boy Kavalier says that's the whole reason he created the hybrids. And yet for his whole life, he's only interacted with synthetics because they're the only ones he can get along with. I think that's really interesting. I loved it when Kirsh, by the way, and he can't even get along with synthetics, it turns out, because Kirsh, who's chafing at the programming he has to always agree with Boy Kavalier, points out that with an ADHD, attention deficit disorder as severe as Boy Cavalier's, impulse control is a real problem. I thought that was a great moment of autonomy for Kirsh, where for a moment he put himself above Boy Kavalier. It was very jarring. It was fantastic. And I think, it showed, as I said, autonomy, that he wasn't just there in service, that he was making his own observations and drawing his own conclusions, as an experimental robot would do, right? That's also very interesting. Is Kirsh on the network? That's now an important question. I thought it was funny that Wendy discovered she can control Adam because he was on the network. She doesn't have some magical control over technology, which we should have guessed, right? I mean, when technology becomes very advanced, it seems like magic, but there in fact is always an explanation. And the explanation here is that she uses the Wi-Fi and talks to the technology just like she talks to the Xenomorphs, which is actually a really great parallel. But first, so this raises some questions though. Didn't Adam have a firewall up? Didn't he have any kind of personal security? You would think he'd be worried about being hacked by anybody. And if you Wendy's just a great hacker. But maybe the way to defeat Wendy, or at least slow her down, would be to shut down the Wi-Fi. So she'd have to go get a hard line like we've seen Kirsh and Morrow have to do. That's right. Kirsh and Morrow can only do hard lines, but this is like the future, and only Wendy is fitted with Wi-Fi? That's crazy. So Morrow and Kirsh, they finally throw down, and it did not go the way I expected. How about you? Who did you think was going to win that fight? With how cold and calculating Kirsh is, I thought for sure he would surprise Morrow and easily beat him. I mean, he out-strategized Morrow, right? When he first captured Morrow, when Morrow came to the island. But when it became a physical fight, Morrow was able to beat him. Because as Morrow points out, like the legend John Henry, as a human, he simply wanted it more than the machine. But then as Kirsh counters, in that same legend, John Henry eventually dies of exhaustion. Which ties into what Morrow says to Joe earlier, right? That becoming part, like they're talking about, ooh, now you're part machine like me, Joe. And I'm like, it's just an iron lung that's inside of him. I don't think it really transforms Joe and allows him to do anything special. I haven't even seen him have any increased physical ability. Like he doesn't even have ability to have better lung power, it seems. Like it's not the same, at least from what we've seen so far. But I guess, Joe should take whatever friends he can, especially if they're at least still, I think the hybrids are technically still part human. But anyway, Morrow says, have you figured out what it costs yet? And Joe says everything. And Morrow says everything doesn't even begin to cover it. It really does seem, well, at least it seems to have consumed Morrow. Maybe it'll consume the hybrids too. Woo! They need more psychiatrists on these projects. All right, so Morrow breaks Kirsh's back. But before he can totally finish him off, I wonder how they're going to fix Kirsh, because they're not going to throw Timothy Oliphant in the trash, unless there's another one of them in shrink wrap in the back that they could start up instead, like another David. Or Walter, as they renamed him. But anyway, Slightly and Smee show up, and it was pretty amazing to see them turn the tables on these two people, or Cyborg and Synthetic, who'd used them like pawns up until that point. I thought it was very rewarding to see Slightly be able to take the upper hand. And to some ways, in a little ways, grow up. You could see that. Good acting there. You could see that on Slightly's face. Finally, I thought the crabs on the beach were a really nice touch. They did remind me of House of the Dragon, but I liked here that, like the scorpion, these are real-life creatures on Earth that are somewhat similar to the Xenomorphs. So I like that. Like to be like, you think the Xenomorph is such a crazy being, but it could exist. You know, we have like little ones running around here. It's like how birds used to be dinosaurs. Oh, wouldn't that be crazy if they're like, at the end, the big reveal is that these are like scorpions and crabs that just went into space and evolved in different ways. But that Xenomorph respected that little crab's territory. Whew, it's tough for domesticated animals out in the wild. And I make that as a joke, but then it occurs to me that that could be some serious commentary. Wendy has domesticated this Xenomorph, but potentially has put it in a disadvantage when, things get tough later on. That is also very interesting. Maybe they'll run into some Xenomorphs who are not domesticated. All right, so what did you think of the season finale of Alien Earth? What are your theories and hopes for a second season? And do you think they're going to get a second season? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.